Hi everyone, it's Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek today. It is Saturday and time for another easy beginner watercolor lesson. We are halfway through this section 2 of watercolor lessons. I've got 15 in each series, and today we're going to do number 8. So I was going through my pictures trying to figure out what to paint, and I ran across a wonderful visit that we had with both of our grandkids at 2 separate times. We have a petting zoo in Englewood, Colorado, and it is the Bellevue Farms Petting Zoo and Train, and we had so much fun. They had some beautiful roosters there, and I thought we could try and paint a rooster today. So if you're ready, let's get started. There are so many wonderful things about this little miniature train in Bellevue Park. It's run by the city of Englewood, and it's just one of the hidden gems of the Denver metro area. It's so easy to get to. There's free parking. The train ride is only $2.50, and it goes all around this park over a bridge that has a creek running under it, so that's really exciting. And through a tunnel. It's just the sweetest little thing. And then when you get into the petting zoo portion, that's also similarly priced, you can see cows and pigs and all kinds of ducks and goats. And these llamas are hilarious. They did not expect me to sneak up on this side to take the picture, and they all just looked up at me while they were eating. But here's what we're going to paint today. I love this breed of rooster, and although my picture's not all that terrific, I did find one here on Unsplash for us that's really quite good. And we can just trace this because it's really just a profile of a rooster, and he's obviously mid-cock-a-doodle-doo there with his mouth wide open. I like that he was sitting on some simple sticks, and it's just such a nice picture for you to trace. So I'm not going to provide a PDF drawing this time. If you'd like to draw him, he's pretty simple to draw, and we'll get to that right now. So whether you're tracing him or drawing him, just use a very simple number 2 pencil. You don't need anything special at all. If you are going to trace it, I recommend printing out that picture on your regular home printer using a black and white mode. And usually it's easier to see the lines that way. And just tape it up to a sunny window or a light box, and then put your watercolor paper over it and trace away. So I'm just drawing the kind of kidney bean shape of his body here and getting the plume of his feathers going out. And then I've got the stick that he's sitting on, and now I'm just going to add a couple of little places to put 2 little chicken legs. Now there are some interesting I don't know what they're called, spikes or some other body part that he's got there coming out of his foot. It might be a back toe. It might be some other part that I'm not familiar with of a chicken. But I'm going to leave that out and just kind of give him little bird legs here just for the sake of our drawing today. Now, if you wanted to be a lot more realistic about this, you certainly could. But the main attraction of this particular chicken is, of course, his beautiful plumage. So that's what we're going to focus on here on the painting. So this is really kind of stylized, just a little simple painting to give yourself something to say, hey, I did that today, and it was a lot of fun, and I hope that this turns out to be that way for you for sure. So now we're going to go ahead and draw in the beak. Now his beak is wide open, so you're just going to draw that hook shape for the top part of the beak, and then underneath it, it kind of just has this canoe shape for his lower jaw and lower part of his bill there. And then we've got his little wattles, I think they're called, that come down. There's one lobe there and then another lobe just behind it. And those will both be red. And then we've got his breast that comes out. We want to make sure we have that curve really nice because he is really quite proud in his cock-a-doodle-doo. And then we have this other little white piece on the side, and we want to go ahead and mark that in lightly. And for his eye, look at where the beak ends, and then you'll know where to place the eye. Whenever you're drawing something, you always want to make sure that you're placing whatever part of your drawing it is that you're putting down. Make sure that you're placing it where it is in relation to the other parts of your drawing. So after you get your basic structure of the chicken in, little placement for the head, that kidney bean shape for his body, and then you can go in and fill in all these little detail parts, and there really aren't many. There's his comb, his eye, he's got some lines around his eye, the beak, the wattles, and that's about it. The rest of it is really just going to be plumage, and that's where this is going to be so fun. So what we're going to do first is just wet our rooster. I was going to say chicken. We're going to wet the rooster entirely except for the wattles. We're just going to go kind of up to the eye, and we're going to leave that white area open there. Don't put any water in that part because we want to be able to paint that a very, very pale tan and do that more towards the end. So we're just going to go ahead and get this entire area wet. So let me skip ahead to where that is all done. And to do that, I used my stroke brush, and I'm still using the stroke brush actually for this first part. But you want to make sure that that whole area has just kind of an even sheen. In this case, it's okay if you have a few puddles because it can make the feathers really interesting. We're going to go in with yellow ochre first. And I'm just using that area of his neck feathers with some yellow ochre. And then right underneath it, I'm going to go into the Indian yellow and put some of that bright yellow right at his chest. And I'm just kind of blending it all together, and now we're going to mix in some of the Prussian blue. Prussian blue is such a really great color for these types of roosters because it's a nice, cool blue. It's got a little bit of a green tone to it, and when it mixes with that yellow ochre, we get this beautiful teal shade, and it really helps to show that luminescence, that iridescence kind of the rooster plumage. And you know what? If you have iridescent paints, this would be a fun time to use them because especially if you have those color shifting ones, you can really get some fun effects there. So we've just gone in and done that rear plumage, and now I'm going into the umber in this set. If you don't have this particular set, use a burnt sienna. This particular Paul Rubens set is named a little bit strangely, in my opinion. They named the burnt sienna what I would call burnt umber, and then the umber what I would call burnt sienna. So, you know, of course, whatever nomenclature your set chooses to use is fine. Just some kind of reddish brown is what you want to use for this. And we're going to go ahead and fill in the area on his rear and the rest of the front. And now we're going to go in with some Payne's Gray in addition to Prussian blue and just kind of fill this area in. It is wonderful to go ahead and let your colors mix and meld together and just kind of let your brush be the plumage. When you're painting this, you want to think about how those feathers are long and how they lay. And we're just going to go in with that Prussian blue and then come back with some of the Payne's Gray and lay on top of them so that we're going to let those colors blend in the wet. And then you'll see that portion on his lower breast there, right above his legs, where I lifted off the color. So to do that, you just get your brush wet, blot it off on your towel, and swipe it over the area, and that will remove the color that you have. And then towards the bottom, we're just going to tap in some more of that umber to help get those darker tips of the lighter feathers. So now we're going to switch to our number 4 brush because this one is a good brush to use to show a little bit more individual feathers. And again, we're not going for any detail here. We're just going for color change and for basic line and shape. And when we are done, our rooster will have a lot of curvy form, and you'll be able to see his musculature under it just by how we place the length of our strokes. So this is a really simple way to do a rooster. You could make this into a fun greeting card or hang it up in your kitchen, however you want to do it. This is really fun and easy to do. So that area where we went first has dried just a little bit, so we can go back in with the yellow ochre and define some of these feathers just a little bit more. Now we didn't have any water up there on his head, so we can go ahead and put the shorter feathers in there. And all it is really is just a swipe of the brush. You can see as I'm laying these strokes down, they really are just plain brush strokes that are going down. There's really nothing fancy to it. Now let's go into what they call the burned brown, and we're going to create just kind of a really pale mix of it. I'm just mixing in a little bit of Payne's Gray here just to kind of change the tone of it a little bit. It was a little too light What I'm trying to do is to get kind of a brownish gray, and I'm going to go ahead also and add some of that umber to it just to kind of give it a little bit more tan. I'm looking for a very thin light texture, excuse me, not texture, thin light paint that I'm going to go in and do the wash on that wattle there. But before I do that, I want to make sure that everything is really dry, because I don't want this to bleed into the next section. So be sure and dry your painting thoroughly once you've got that paint mixed. And now we've got that nice puddle of a very light brown mixed, but I think what I'm going to do first is go ahead and get into the red and work on his comb, because I realized that with that red, we're using the scarlet red, by the way, that's going to establish our values. So you know how watercolor has its color shift, and in fact you can even see it on the body of our chicken here. When we put those colors in, they're really vibrant and dark when they first go onto the page, but then after they dry a little bit, they do kind of pale. So that's just normal. That's a color shift. It does happen with watercolor. And before I put that light tone in on that side little wattle thing, his lower cheek, I guess, I don't really know what to call it. I'm not a biologist. I don't name the animals. I just like to paint them. So if you really want to know the parts of the chicken, you're not going to get that information from me, but I will tell you how to paint one. We're going to just paint in the red portions of his front wattle there and his comb, and see how it goes all the way around his face. And there will be one little dip of red that comes back into his feathers just behind his eye. And once we have all of that in, you can see I'm watering my brush down even more, and I'm just putting a tiny bit of that light tan that we mixed. It's light tan because we've added so much more water to it just to make that pigment so pale. And now we're going to go in and mix a little bit more of that umber, and we're going to work on the tips of these lower feathers here while that upper portion is drying. So you're just kind of going to make check marks with your brush. Very simple, just putting the tips of those feathers in. And I like to go beyond the lines that I've drawn just a little bit, just to give it a little bit more of a natural look. And now we'll go back into that umber, get a little bit more of it, and we're just swiping little lines that help us realize that there are some large feathers here. And that is all there is to it. It's so simple to do this, and it's so fun, and you can have a lot of fun playing with this too. If you want to keep this looser than what I've done even, you can really have fun with this, and while it's still wet, you can just sprinkle some regular table salt on it, and that will create some really dynamic effects. And that will really give your feathers some fun starburst effects that really look like downy fluff. And it's really a neat thing to do. You can do that on the background. You can add splatters to it. You can make these feathers run into water so that they're kind of drifting off into the background. However you want to play with this, it's so much fun. And the parts that I'm doing now on his rear end there, and now just back here on his head and neck, I'm using some of that yellow ochre, and I've mixed just a tiny bit of the umber into it. So it's still the yellow ochre, but it's just a tiny bit darker. And you want to keep your brush strokes a little bit separated, but close enough together so that it doesn't just look like he's just gotten out of a puddle of water. But you can see on the back there how I've extended those feathers beyond the line that I've drawn, just so that he can kind of show some excitement and a movement in his chest and neck. And because when he's giving that cock-a-doodle-doo, you know, that's a lot of energy and force that goes into that. And he would definitely ruffle his feathers a little bit when he's doing that. Now we're using more of the Prussian blue, basically going over all of the areas that we've done before with similar or slightly different colors. So with this Prussian blue, I think I originally put Payne's Gray down there on the lower portion, but now I'm going over it in Prussian blue. And now I'm going to mix in some Payne's Gray, and we'll just kind of go on the tail a little bit and just get those long feather strokes in. They don't have to be even. They don't have to be perfect. I let that one go off a little bit on the side, and I'm just kind of doing fast, quick strokes because I want this to have dynamic energy. This is where we're going to use our paintbrush to create texture. And that texture is what's going to give our bird form and dimension in space. So you can see how I've got the lines curved. The way that they're curved will suggest the musculature underneath. And here we're going in with a little bit darker version of the brown to create a shadow just behind his tail there, and just continuing to let those colors mix. Now I've got this green, and it is a beautiful green. I really like it. It's the Hooker's Green Brilliant. Is that what they say? Sorry, I'm trying to read very small print here. Yes, Hooker's Green Brilliant is what they call it. I love Hooker's Green. I love sap green. This one in my mind lends a little bit more towards sap green, but it mixes so well with this Prussian blue. And this is where we can get that really kind of iridescent look. Now, do you see right there how I cut that green paint up into the brown feathers? That's a little bit of negative painting, and that's an excellent way to establish distance, space in between those brown feathers if you just cut the background color up into it. So there's a lot of fun things you can do here. Just play along and see what you come up with. And once you think you've got enough, then we're going to give it a dry and we'll go on to the next step. Now that our painting is completely dry, we can go in and work on the details. Now with these wattles in front, we definitely want to put one behind the one in front here. So when we look really closely at it, the one in front does have a slight shadow to it, but it's not quite as dark as the one behind it. So you want to put a little bit of water on the wattle. Don't go all the way to the edge, and don't make it too thick. You're just going to put a small glaze of water there, and then we're going to drop in just a tiny bit of the Payne's gray mixed in with that red. And it will give us a nice deep purple, which would be a natural shadow color. We'll go ahead and dance that around his comb just a little bit to give it some more texture. And once again, you don't need to be precise, you don't need to be perfect. Just wherever you think that those little bits of suggestions of texture will really look good. So now we've got some yellow ochre, and I think what I want to do is to mix in some of the lemon yellow. I want to check and make sure that's what they call it here. No, I'm sorry, they call it permanent lemon yellow. Just want to make sure that you guys know which one I'm talking about in your Paul Rubens set. Lemon yellow will work if you don't have this particular set though. So we want to use that same yellow ochre, but we're going to make it just a tiny bit brighter by adding some of that lemon yellow. And that's what we're going to use for the beak. We don't want it to be exactly the same color as his neck feathers, but pretty close. And now we're going to go ahead and wet with some clean water that area where he has his little tan wattle thingy. And I've mixed some burnt sienna in with a little bit of that red, and again that red is the scarlet, and excuse me, it's not burnt sienna, it's the umber. If you're using any other set, it's burnt sienna. And I'm going to go around the edge to just kind of let that red pigment pull in. If we look really closely at our reference photo, you can see that there's just a tiny bit of red around the edge of this little piece on his lower cheek. And then at the top, we'll just dot in a tiny bit of Payne's gray, and right across the center there, just a little bit more of the brown. And now I'm going to do his eye, and I think that in this case we can go ahead and use the black. They have a coal black in here, and it's so small that you can certainly mix the black with that umber and an ultramarine, but you know, it's not going to be big enough to really have a lot of dimension to really do anything with. So using that coal black would be just fine. And you want to try and leave a little highlight, but if you don't, that's okay. In fact, I left one, but it was too small, so I went back and we'll add in the end with our bleed proof white, and then you'll be able to see how that works. I'm using a heat tool for all of these drying parts, but if you don't have one, you can go ahead and just walk away from your painting and just make sure it's thoroughly dry before you go on to the next step. And in case you're wondering, I do have the entire supply list down below in the description. And let's see, we're using the Paul Rubens paints this time. This Paul Rubens paper is 5x7, and the Princeton snap brushes. Any paint brushes that you find that you enjoy, you know, they're great to use. I like these, and I like the Mimic, something that is a man-made fiber so that it'll give you some good feedback and let you know about how much pressure and how much water, how thin your wash is when you're putting it down. I think that using a little bit of a firmer brush when you're a beginner is really quite helpful. I'm going in with some more of that scarlet red and just filling in his cheek that's behind him, and a little bit on the bottom there. And now I've mixed some of that scarlet with the Payne's gray, and I'm just suggesting the shadows of those ridges around his eye, and just kind of you know, defining the ones on his comb just a little bit more, not getting real, you know, intense with it, just kind of suggesting that they are just a tiny bit darker. And we'll do the same thing here on this back wattle, just to make sure that we can push it back. Darker colors in watercolor will recede from the viewer, and lighter colors will come forward. So at the end, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of highlight on there to really separate that. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and add these tiny little shadows in here and leave a space between those two so that you have that lighter ridge on that wattle that's closer to us. So now we'll go into our dark mix of Payne's Gray and Prussian Blue, and we're going to add just a tiny bit of that of the burned brown or the burnt sienna to it. And now we're going to go in and just tap in a tiny bit of a shadow underneath this white cheek area. And you notice we kept that top edge really uneven because that body part, that cheek part, is really kind of frilly on the edges. And we're going to make the shadow kind of frilly too as we go in with some more yellow ochre and cut into that just a little bit. That's going to soften that shadow and help it blend into the feathers just a little bit to just kind of help define that shape of the rooster right there around his neck. And now I think it's time to look at his feet. So let's go back into that umber, and we're going to mix it with a little bit of the scarlet and keep it really thin. We don't want this to be very viscous at all. And we're just going to put a light pinkish brown wash on his feet. And I've just got some claws going toward the back and the rest of them toward the front. I think I only drew 2 for his left foot, the one that's closest to us. And I've kind of got 1 hidden there on the right on the back. As this is drying, I just wanted to mention to you guys, I really appreciate it when you like and comment and share these videos. Those kinds of things are really what keeps Art on the Creek alive. It helps me to keep creating videos like this for you. All of those little things that you do really help my channel to stay on YouTube, and I really appreciate that. If you would like something more though, I do have kind of a Patreon right here through memberships. And what you can do is get access to all kinds of really cool things. I've got special member videos that are available, full-time tutorials. And those are ones that the members can really pilot themselves. You guys can decide what it is that you'd like to paint. Maybe you've always wanted to paint a cactus, but I haven't done that here on this channel yet for beginner watercolors. So no matter what skill level you are, but you really want to paint a cactus, well, if you put in a request to me as a member, we can go ahead and get that done. So I really like tailor making this channel for you, and of course I will always continue to provide free tutorials here on YouTube, free reviews, but as a member you do have access to just a little bit more, and sometimes I'll give you a review ahead of time so that you will be able to watch it before the general public sees it. So just keep that in mind. If that's something that is right for you, I am eternally grateful. If it's something that is not quite right for you right now, I totally understand. There is no obligation. There's never a requirement to become a member. I just want to let you know that that's available to you. And as a member, like I said, you'll have the opportunity for select videos that are only available to members, in addition to a lot of art supplies that I use and review here, and maybe I've only used it once and then I can't use it again because I just don't have time. I would need to have 10 of me to be able to go through all of the art supplies that I've collected over the years from doing reviews. So if that's something that interests you, I will make that available to my members once a month free of charge. I will do a little drawing, and we'll see who takes whatever item it is I'm featuring, and I'll mail it to you free of charge. So that's something else that's available to my members as well. That one I think is only for the Pikes Peak level, but for all of the other levels of membership, and there are 3 tiers, there really is something for everyone. So if that's something that interests you and you want to read more about it and learn more about what's available for the members on Art on the Creek, there's a button right under the video here that says join, and you can learn about the membership tiers there, or there's a link down in the description that you can copy and paste into your browser and go from there. So if that's something that interests you, I really appreciate your consideration. If you'd like to give a one-time donation or gift, I also offer super thanks here on the channel, which is also a button just up under the video. And all of these things, every little bit of commission that I collect from affiliate links that are down in the description, or any kind of membership, anything like that, the super thanks, all of these things really go to help keep Art on the Creek here on the air for you. So I thoroughly appreciate it. And if none of those things are really something you can swing right now, I completely understand. And I'm just so happy that you're here. And since you are here, let's talk about this little branch. I'm just going in with all of the dark colors that I've used and going over it with a little bit of yellow ochre, just kind of doing wet on wet and kind of getting the colors to mix in there. So I think I've got some of that burnt brown, the Payne's gray, and a little bit of the yellow ochre. And then I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and we'll come back later and we're going to do some details on the branch. And while that branch is drying, let's go ahead and focus on separating those two red wattles just a little bit more. This is the moment when you might want to get a smaller brush. I'm using a number 1 script brush. This one is a silver black velvet. You can use whichever brand you like, anything that's going to give you a really fine line. And we're just going to go around the curve of that wattle that is closest to us. And what that will do is it will help establish that separation between the two wattles. And we can also put just a tiny bit up on top of his beak and a little dot in his eye. And that is all we need our bleed proof white for today. You can use a gel pen if you don't have that, or you can even use a white pastel. White colored pencil might work. You'd have to, the one that I really like the best is Prismacolor for that. Yeah, just use one that's really opaque white. I think the pastel would be really nice though, a pastel pencil, because it gives it just a little bit of a sparkle. And I really like bleed proof white because gel pens, you know, I love them, but I'm always frustrated with them because you can use them a little bit on watercolor and then they just don't last. So if you're willing to embrace that, you'll just have to replace your gel pens, a white gel pen, then, you know, that's fine. Go ahead and use one of those. I have them, I use them, and yes, I do replace them more often than I'd like to. So I'm kind of relying on this bleed proof white just a little bit more. All of that is listed down in the description as well. So here's where we're using that number 1 script brush, and I've gone into just that dark brown, which I think is the burned brown. You can mix a little bit of Payne's gray into it. You can just mix whatever darks you have on your palette, however you want to do it. And I'm just kind of suggesting that there would be some bark pattern on this branch that he's sitting on. On the right hand side where it bends there, I'm kind of doing little spirals to suggest some kind of a knot, or where a branch might be coming toward us. I'm not putting any real definition into it. I'm just making up a design. This is really, really simple. We just need to tell our viewers what the rooster is standing on. And by adding these little lines, we will know that it is a piece of wood or a branch instead of maybe a metal edge of a bench or something. And you know what? It doesn't even matter. If you wanted to go ahead and leave that plain without these lines, you sure could. I'm going to go ahead and sign this with the script brush because that's what I have on hand. But if you want to go ahead and use a pencil or pen to sign your work, you certainly can. And I definitely encourage you to sign and date whatever it is you've painted on the front of what you're painting, because you need to be able to remember where you were at this moment when you painted this rooster. And in a year's time, you will be able to see how much you have improved. That is all I have for us today here, my friends, and I am so glad you've joined me. I hope you enjoy painting this beautiful rooster, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye now.